Welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where our teenage angst bullshit also has a body count. I'm Anna Bogutska, co-founder of the Final Girls Collective and your podcast host. If you're new to this show, welcome. In real life, the Final Girls put on events and screenings that explore the intersections of horror film and feminism. Our next one, which we've just announced, has just gone on sale, is going to be a preview of the Palme d'Or winning absolute mindfuck of a cinematic masterpiece, Julia Ducournau's Titane. I'll leave the link in the show notes. Do grab a ticket really soon. That's going to be very special. But back to the show. Here on this podcast, we take a horror trope every season and explore it to death by diving deep into the horror movies and the horror adjacent movies that represented the best. In the fourth series of the podcast, we are now looking at teen horror, how it's evolved, and why teenagers and their issues make some of the most compelling protagonists of the genre. Before we dive into our episode this week, a quick reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at TheFinalGirlsUK for updates, ticket announcements, and many horror dance TikToks. We also have a Patreon where you can support our work, get occasional bonus episodes. If you don't want to join in, that's fine, but we really would appreciate if you could leave us a rating and a review over an Apple Podcast. Today's episode is probably the weirdest double bill I've ever put together in the show. On the one hand, there's a horror comedy about a bunch of ghoulish preteens taking on the bootleg Universal monsters in order to save the planet from something. I'm talking about Monster Squad. And then there's the darkest of teen black comedies, where murder and suicide are an everyday occurrence and everybody talks like they're in an alien planet where everybody wears shoulder pads and color coordinates their manias to their outfits. Obviously, that's Heathers. It is the strangest of combinations, but it kind of works. And to be honest, makes for a great double bill for a lazy weekend in. And joining me to discuss this wacky combination of is the chief film critic of The Independent and my fellow American Horror Story fanatic, Clarice Lockery. And with all of that said, please enjoy our take on Monster Squad and Heathers.
Damn, son, look at all of these monsters. Come on, all of you monsters, out of here. Everyone, out of this room. Come, you, on the bed. Come on, out, take a hike. There he goes. You see any more monsters? Ooh, look at that big, scary monster. Ooh.
Hi, Clarice. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm one of the movies we're talking about today is one of my favorite movies.
I know, it's the reason why I asked you to come on to talk about it, because I know you absolutely love this one.
A lot of my personality is wrapped into this movie.
Is it? That's kind of scary.
I mean, yeah, well, not in that way, but in other ways, yes.
Okay, so we'll break that down later on in this episode. But we were chatting beforehand, and I have like a slight confession to make. So when I very confidently kind of paired these two films together and asked you to come on this episode to talk about these ones in particular, and then as we were about to record, I genuinely, for the life of me, I was like, why did I pair Monster Squad and Heathers together? I cannot remember. And, having...
Yeah.
It's a curious choice. But before we kind of dig into both of them individually, having rewatched them and revisited them, kind of, do they fit together for you?
I think they do. Like, I know you were a bit like, oh my god, what's the link? But for me, they're two such curious films in terms of, like, they are things we would never see again. They were so of their era and also outside of their era, because both of them didn't particularly do very well when they were first released. I think financially and to some degree with critics as well, because both were considered like too adult or like too advanced for the audience they were made for. I mean, it's different audiences we're talking about. Obviously, Heathers was a teen movie. Monster Squad is more tween than teen, like I guess being on the cusp of teenagehood.
Yeah.
It's not really, I think, not for kids. Certainly not.
It's kind of like in that Goonies vibe, right? There, you've got tweens and kind of like slightly older kids as well who go on an adventure and bond together and all that stuff. So you kind of try to hit both target audiences. Like, it's cute for the older teens and it's relatable for the tweens.
Yeah, but this is the thing with Monster Squad, is what's so interesting about it is that it's definitely doing more than the Goonies. I mean, yeah, it's fascinating because watching it, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if this is appropriate. Usually I'm the last person to say that because I'm like, you know, we are way too patronizing towards teenagers and kids, thinking that they can't handle things, and 90% of the time they can, when there are these like weird scares. But watching Monster Squad, I was a bit like, they just gave all the kids guns. I don't know about this. I felt like a concerned parent watching Monster Squad. But I think that's what's so fascinating about it, is the fact that in 1987 this kind of film was possible to make. I don't think you would ever see that now, and it's kind of a freak accident that this happened.
And I think you could say the same thing about Heathers, actually. And in fact, I think the director of Heathers, Michael Lehman, has said that several times. It's like, you could not make Heathers now. In fact, you couldn't make Heathers even 10 years ago. It would feel off and weird and almost too much. So it is this kind of weird anomaly. And you know what, like, you know, Past Anna had a point, and I think that might have been the point that I was trying to make, is that they're kind of horror adjacent teen films, but they're too much to be straight teen films in so many ways, and they're too little to be straight up teen horror, which is why I like both of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said, because they did try to remake Heathers. There was a TV show
which lasted
that
like
they made
2 seconds.
Well, I don't think it ever aired because they kept trying to premiere it, and then, you know, sadly, a real life event would happen that would be far too close to the plot of the TV show, and they had to cancel it. And I think it just never aired in the end, which is probably for the best.
Let's get into the first one of our unconventional Black teen horror adjacent double bill. And let's talk about Monster Squad from 1987. So for anyone who maybe has not seen this in a while, because it might be too kiddie horror, can you briefly summarize what the film is about?
It is preteens versus Universal classic movie monsters. That's the plot. I love it. There's some sort of, I kind of don't understand the plot of Monster Squad. There is an amulet that is all goodness inside an amulet, and every century there's an opportunity for it to not be that for some reason.
And there has to be like a spell in German that has to be read by a virgin. That's very important that it's a virgin. The amulet thing, take it or leave it. But the Universal monsters, yes.
Yeah, because they want the amulet, because they want just monsters everywhere and all the time. So, by breaking the amulet, I believe, then they can just be like, we're all here now.
And I love it. So, before the monsters show up, we do get introduced to the Monster Squad, which is this little group of preteen boys who are very nerdy, kind of nasty in their own way. So who and love horror shit. So who are the Monster Squad boys?
Well, they're sort of like the Goonies, but like the Goonies that your parents would tell you not to hang out with because they would give off really bad vibes.
Like the dirtbag Goonies?
They are kind of the dirtbag Goonies because there's like the leader kid who's Sean, right? I feel like all the kids blended into one like trouble child by the end of the movie. There's like the leader, there's the like pint-sized JD from Heather's character, who's called Rudy. He's got a leather jacket. He is a pervert, and because it's the 80s, everyone's totally fine with that. There's the best friend. Then there's the kid that they just call Fat Kid.
His name is Horace.
I know, but
he keeps saying it.
This is such a supremely 80s thing.
Yeah.
Of like, it's meant to be this triumphant thing of like, my name is Horace. And he gets a moment at the end of the movie where he stands up to his bullies. He's got a gun. Again, by the end of the movie, every kid's got a gun. And he like cocks the gun and threatens to shoot his bullies and says, my name is Horace. But the problem with that is because they also want him to be like the target of jokes. Even the good characters call him Fat Kid.
Yeah.
So like, it's that to me is so of its era. This sort of like, I feel like Goonies does it as well, where it's like both being sympathetic to the outsider character, but also like making fun of them at the same time. Like,
well,
you can't quite decide.
Yeah, the Goonies does exactly the same thing with Chunk. Like his friends constantly humiliate him, and even his whole nickname is based on the fact that he's a chubby kid.
Yes, it's not because of like some other reason. It's very cruel.
Yeah.
It's very cruel.
The only thing I will say in defense of these very mean Monster Squad-y kids is that I fucking love the t-shirt that the Sean wears where it's like Stephen King rules.
Yes.
I want that.
I mean, I probably would choose to hang out with these kids over the Goonies. Because they are a little bit cooler, even though they're assholes a little bit.
Yeah. I think they're the sort of assholes that would grow out of being assholes eventually. But because it is the 80s and because they're boys that only hang out with boys, they are inevitably assholes.
Yeah, and this is another thing I find really fascinating about the dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Is, like, the role of women and girls in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, they want to have a girl member, but like any girl who was like their age, who was like as cool as them, as smart as them, would be perceived as a threat. So they go, what we'll actually have is we'll have the Sean's younger sister, Phoebe, who's like the adorable,
super cute little girl.
Yeah, well, like she's like it's like a reference to Frankenstein.
Yes.
The little girl that he throws like but it's sort of a visual nod to that.
Yes.
This doesn't happen though in the movie.
No, yeah, I was about to say there is no killing of little girls in this movie.
Yeah, she just gets to be best friends with Frankenstein's monster, which is very sweet. But kind of a visual nod to that character, but really her role is to say, hey, we've got a girl, but she's very unthreatening because she is a little pigtailed child. And I always find that stuff, and I find those kinds of gender dynamics in this era of movie making really fascinating, because it's always that, like, it is the constant push and pull between, oh, we want to have girls, but we can't make the girls, like, they can't have too much power, otherwise it becomes a problem.
That's exactly it. And what about the monsters? So we've got Dracula is the big bad bully, and we've got the Wolfman, we've got the Gillman, we've got Mummy, and we've got Frankenstein's monster.
And I feel like I love Dracula in this because I was trying to think, like, okay, what version of Dracula is he specifically meant to be referencing? And he's quite, like, he's sort of presented as quite menacing, but the look is very camp.
Yes. He's, you know what? I think he's like, I think visually he takes a lot from Bela Lugosi's Dracula, but he's kind of giving me a Count Chocula vibe.
The vibe I got was like the Munsters, like the 60s.
Ooh.
Like that kind of even the look, because I was thinking it feels like it should be Bela Lugosi, but I don't know if he really like, because Bela Lugosi was very sexy as Dracula, and this Dracula is like, he's just gonna give you some candy and that's it.
I feel like he was trying to channel Bela Lugosi, but at the same time he was very aware that he was in a kids movie, so there was no one to be sexy yet, so he was like, I'm gonna be Bella, but with the sexiness completely erased, because obviously inappropriate. You know, when it's that thing of like, someone who's like containing themselves, it's like, don't be too sexy, don't be too scary. This is not the time or the place.
Which it sounds like I'm being very negative, but I like the campiness of the monsters in this. I think it works because like the tone of this movie is this like fascinating tension between the kid and the adult, and that's really the place in their lives that all these kids are at. They're like on the threshold of adulthood, and they want to act like adults, but they aren't really adults. And so it's by the end of the movie, you have this situation where like the actual monsters are quite kiddie and quite goofy and not very threatening. And it's the kids who, I keep going back to this, but like the kids all have guns at the end. They have actual firearms. And they kill the monsters, which to me is quite surprising in this kind of film, to have like them actually go, I'm gonna shoot the Wolfman in the chest, and I'm gonna kill him, and he's gonna thank me for it.
And the Wolfman also, let's just say, is the only one who's like a real man, who like we meet as a man and turns into the Wolfman. And he's like quite desperate, being like, please put me in jail, I'm gonna turn into a monster. And he fucking thanks the kid for killing him. I was like, Jesus Christ, I know he really is the mini JD in this film.
Yeah, and like the sort of the implication of it all is quite dark, because like the monsters, they just wanted this stupid amulet. and they're all kind of in goofy, very Halloween costumey disguises. I mean, I think the practical effect work on the Wolfman is great, fantastic, but you look at him and, you know, he's not very threatening. He's quite like, oh, again, I feel like the Wolfman's going to give me candy and pat me on the head and send me on my way. So to have that, and then in that final scene, it's like, it really does feel like this metaphor for the kids, you know, embracing adulthood by like turning to adult things, which I guess is like violence and control and death and kind of like nasty stuff. So I mean, I guess it's not surprising to me that it was written by Shane Black. I'll just say that.
Yes. We can see all the Shane Blackisms all over the place here. But the one thing I wanted to add about kind of the design of the monsters as well. So because this wasn't a Universal film, like these are obviously all the classic Universal monsters, but they're just a little bit off from being exact designs. But at the same time, I think they were kind of designed in a way where they would be perhaps scarier to children. So I think a lot of that is tapping into that kind of that weird tension of like, we're preteens, but we're not really either teens or fully fledged adults yet. So like these monsters are supposed to be scary, not really for an adult audience, but for like a kid audience, I think. And they were like, I read that they were terrifying to, especially the little girl. Like the Dracula guy had to take off his fangs, because it would scare her too much if he had the fangs in, and they were kind of acting opposite each other. So she was way too terrified of him. I was like, you know what, that kind of makes sense. Like, it seems a little bit goofy and campy to us, but if I had seen this movie as a kid, I would be freaked out by them.
Yeah, I think I was on a different level when I was a kid, because like I used to have nightmares about vampires, but they looked like proper Nosferatu. Like, I guess I probably saw Nosferatu when I was 2 years, because that like this is the thing, the actual Universal monsters are still and still very frightening. And I think it is interesting that like they're sort of deemed as things that you could show kids these days. And I think I was shown a couple of the Universal monster things. And just to see the comparison of like that design to what is like, this is meant to be the kiddie version of it. And it's, yeah, I guess I was just way too hardcore as a kid.
And the other thing that I kind of love, sorry, I just lost that line. I was too hardcore as a kid.
It's too hardcore. You were on Count Dracula, I was already on Nosferatu. I'd already progressed.
When did you watch it for the first time?
Well, this is the thing, I don't have a memory of watching it, but I remember having nightmares about vampires, and the vampires looked like Nosferatu. They did not look like any other version of Dracula.
Interesting.
So I must have seen it or like been exposed to it in some way.
So I remember, my first traumatic and very clear memory of watching any horror film and also having nightmares about it is Freddy in Nightmare on Elm Street, which we covered in last week's episode. But the one thing that I wanted to kind of bring up as well about Monster Squad, and which I love in all movies, is the treehouse and how much the kids love horror. Like, that's why they bond, right? Aside from being little dipshits, they also just love movie monsters. They love horror stories. There's a great scene with our main guy Sean and his dad basically begging him to go see the movie because 24 hours later it would have been completely spoiled for him. So the Monster Squad invented spoiler culture, is what I'm saying. But how do you feel horror culture fits into this film?
Well, that one is fascinating because the movie franchise he's talking about is called Groundhog Day. And I was very confused for a second before I remembered this was 1987. Groundhog Day came out in like 1993. I was like, there's been 12 Groundhog Days? I thought it was a joke about how like Groundhog Day is like the same thing. They just kept making them and it's just Bill Murray like trapped in the same day and it's the same movie over and over again. Which I guess was the joke, that the Groundhog Day horror franchise is the same thing over and over again. Yeah. Like, I don't know, but it took me a good 5 minutes to figure out that they were not talking about Bill Murray Groundhog Day. But yes, like I love that idea of that franchise though, and where the dad makes a joke about like, oh, but they like put him in a microwave and cut him up and set him in a doorway, and he's like, Dad, that happened in Groundhog Day 7. Like this great little joke about how I think about how like the affectation for horror comes with like, sometimes has to come with you admitting that it's schlock and like, but it's good schlock, and you love to just go see the same thing over and over again because horror, you know, can in fact be very comforting, and I think that's what the kids love about this. Like, I don't know, it's interesting that it's never about the scariness, I think.
No, it's about the community experience for them, right? It's like, no, I want to go to see it tonight when all my friends are going to go see it, when we're going to talk about it. It's not even about the movie, really. It's about being there with everyone else watching it.
Yeah, and the ritual of having this thing, which I guess is like the very core of fandom.
Yes.
And why sequels to things exist, because I think we as the people like the ritual of going back. You know, it's why Wes Anderson's so popular. You go back because you want to see the thing again.
The same
and
thing.
You want to be comforted, and you want to be held, and you want to be like, and I think that's always been so true, of the horror genre and the horror fandom, is that like people just really like the ritual of it. And I think, you know, connecting it to the fact that, yeah, the monsters here are the universal monsters, the ones that we've had our entire lives, and we love just going back to see, like, you know, what's the creature from the Black Lagoon going to do this time? He's probably going to come out of a lake and go blah. But we love it.
Yeah, which is why I think we keep coming back to these original monsters. Let's call them that, right? Because especially because the Universal monsters created such a visual blueprint for what these monsters would look like. There's a reason we think of, you know, kind of the sexy Dracula that was established by Bela Lugosi's Dracula in the 30s versus the Nosferatu-esque Dracula established by Murnau, because it like they were just on a bigger cultural scale. And some of these monsters obviously like caught on more than others, like the amount of times that there have been variations of adaptations of Frankenstein's monster and Dracula, and kind of the Mummy, but not so many of like Gilman or Wolfman. So like they keep coming back. So we need very little visual information to completely clock who these monsters are, what they can do, and where, and kind of what their personalities are like, really. We know that Frankenstein's monster is not really an evil creature, so it makes sense that he is the self-sacrificing one in Monster Squad as well, and kind of befriends this little girl.
Yeah, and again, like, we're talking about, like, the scariness of these figures, and, you know, when you go back to the original Universal films, and you go, wow, well, yeah, really, these are frightening figures, and they are still frightening today. But because culturally we're not really receiving the original character, we're receiving it filtered through like Halloween costumes, Halloween decorations, like things like this Monster Squad, things like the Munsters. You know, it's no coincidence to me that Guillermo del Toro, you know, won an Oscar for making a fuckable gill man, you know. It's really, I think these characters hold such a culturally, like, it's comfort. I think they are so comforting to people because they are a thing that has always been here. and like, it reminds them of their childhood and the first time they were exposed to these characters. You know, it reminds them of Halloween and, like, very nice memories of dressing up and going trick-or-treating and, you know, watching the original classic Universal things with their family on, you know, a stormy night under the covers with the popcorn. Like, it's...
Oh, that's so cute.
But I feel like when we're talking about the Universal monsters, like, we're having to hold these two images together at the same time of both, like, they're still really frightening, but also they're kind of not frightening anymore because we too much associate them with, like, nice things and nice memories and good cultural things. So I think that's maybe why Monster Squad works so well, because it can kind of combine those two things of, they can be a believable threat to these kids, but also, like, you know, they're not scary.
They're not going to hurt them real bad.
And the kids can pretty easily defeat them.
Yeah.
You know, I think it is kind of interesting with years of monster movies of, like, how impossible it should be to kill Dracula, Gilman, Mummy. And in this movie, they're just like, one bullet to the heart, we're done.
And on that note, actually, to to kind of wrap our conversation around the Monster Squad, we kind of mentioned before that there is like the kids are fucking violent in this. What do you think of not so much the horror monsters, but like the kids and the scarier scenes, or like the ones that are kind of perhaps surprisingly violent with hindsight?
Yeah, I'm very shocked by the violence. And again, like I said this earlier, like I hate to be the finger wagging, but I think because of where we are today, culturally, societally, like just where we are at this point in history, it's quite a shocking image to see a kid just with a gun, using the gun in a movie, and it's not, and they are meant to be the hero. I think today, that image, there's a lot of dissonance, a lot of like uncomfortable shit associated with that. But I think this will lead us on to Heathers. I think that's the thing. It's you have to watch it in the context of it being 1987. And the image at the time just played as like, yeah, maybe a little bit of a joke, but also I think for the audience it was made for. You know, the kids were still watching. You know, like kids watch violent action movies all the time and they fantasize themselves as the guy with the gun. They want to be Bruce Willis. And so I think for the audience it was made for, it's not shocking to them, or it's not like dissonant to them, because it's just playing into their own fantasies. And I guess if we have an issue with it, we should be questioning why as kids, I think we all, you know, had fantasies of, you know, wielding a gun and shooting the bad guy. I guess it brings up a lot of stuff.
And I think you're right. I think this is a perfect segue into talking about Heathers. But before we do, I assume that the listeners of this podcast may not have revisited. I might be wrong, but I'm going to make the assumption that the listeners of the podcast have not revisited the Monster Squad in a while. Would you recommend people revisit this little film?
Yes, because some of the lines in this are absolutely golden. When they're driving to defeat Dracula, I can't even remember. It's one of the kids says, if we pull this off, I'm gonna shit. And I thought he was gonna continue the sentence, but he doesn't. I actually rewound, because I was like, sure he's gonna say shit something. Nope. If we pull this off, I'm gonna shit, and I'm taking that line and I'm gonna use it in my real life, because that made me laugh so. Like, this is the thing, because it's Fred Dekker and Shane Black wrote the script together,
but you can almost
some real gems.
You could almost tell which lines were written by Shane Black, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like Jesus Christ.
I feel like probably that one, right?
Yeah, and also the one, I think this is one of the most famous one, where it's like, I think it's the mini JD who goes, "The Wolfman's got nards."
Well, yeah, because they have a whole argument over whether they're like, I can't kick the Wolfman in the balls, he doesn't have them. And then he kicks him, he's like, oh yeah, he does. Cool. Sick. Like, that's really fine. Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with this one. It's such a perfect kind of Sunday afternoon watch. Like, if you're a little bit hungover and you're just kind of like, my brain not working properly, this is a perfect watch.
Yeah, or for Halloween, because this is quite maybe hypocritical, ironic of me. I don't know. Like, on Halloween, I don't like to watch scary movies. I like to watch ghoulish
movies. Yes, I love that. Yeah,
and this hits the spot. This is a perfect Halloween movie for me.
So on that note, let's move on to Heathers, aka one of Clarice's favorite films.
Yeah, it wasn't Monster Squad. Like, that's clear.
Dear Diary, my teen angst bullshit has a body count. The most popular people in school are dead. Everybody's sad, but it's a weird kind of sad. Suicide gave Heather depth, Kurt a soul, Ram a brain. I don't know what it's given me, but I've got no control over myself when I'm with JD. Are we going to prom or to hell?
Can we start a conversation about Heathers kind of with you, and kind of what is your relationship with this film? Kind of why do you love it so much that you say it's one of your favorite ones ever?
Yeah, so I saw it for the first time actually at university. I didn't see it when I was a teenager. Because I wasn't like... I think it's really had like a bit of a cultural like reawakening more recently with the musical, I guess, with the TV show. A lot of people are talking about it now, but growing up, I don't remember people really talking about Heathers that much. I knew it as like one of those Winona Ryder movies, but I finally like sat down to watch it, and I think it's mostly how the character of Veronica is both written and performed, and the idea that, you know, this is such an incredibly dark movie, and every time I rewatch it I'm reminded of, like, you know, again, I think as culturally it's been filtered down a little bit, and if you go watch the musical it's very interesting because the stuff they cut out is basically all the really dark stuff. But to have this character like Veronica, who at the end of the day, all she wanted was to just make her school a nicer place. And she says that several times during the film. She's like, I just wanted people to be nice to each other. And having that very pure thought and ambition, you know, hitting up against the wall of real life. And real people society. Starting to sound like JD. That's concerning. Like that's kind of the tragedy at the end of Heathers, is that, like, the thing that she wanted doesn't really exist, or if you want it you have to completely tear down the system that is in place, but you can't, because then you turn into a JD, you know? Like, it's this sort of... I like that it gets at how hard it is to be good in the world.
That's so beautiful. But let's get into the details of Heathers a bit more. Kind of, could you briefly summarize the plot of the film for me?
Yes. So, Veronica is part of the Heathers, which she's the only non-Heather, but the others are three teenage girls all called Heather, and they've got different colours to tell them apart, don't worry. And, you know, she is just what I said, basically. She was someone who wasn't popular her entire life. She kind of got adopted into this clique. And she hates her friends. She hates popularity. She hates the stuff that they're doing to other people, the bullying, the kind of the way that they embarrass other girls and make them feel small. The way that, like, the way as well that there's so much about sexual abuse in this film as well, of, like, it's really interesting because it's like all of the Heathers are victims, but, like, what's sort of so scary and repulsive about it is that they ignore it and they don't talk about it, and they kind of, like, make it a part of their lives, and it kind of makes you feel a bit sick. So everything about it is making her feel sick. And so she runs into this guy called JD, played by the one and only Christian Slater, the best casting
ever.
Who's the outsider guy. You know, he wears his trench coat, he sits on his own at lunch, he reads long books, and they develop a very heated but toxic relationship, and he very much shares in her vision of, like, why can't we just get rid of the bullies? But they have different interpretations of what that means. She thinks, well, I'll just wish this in my head and not do anything about it. And his interpretation is, let's start murdering people. And that's, I guess, where the movie kicks off, because they go to the Chandler's house, and there's a bit of a mix-up, and Veronica thinks they're playing a prank. JD knows that they're actually murdering her, and she dies. And it kind of just falls apart from that point on. I mean, it had already fallen apart the second she died, but it gets worse from there.
What's really interesting is I've watched this film like a million times. I actually weirdly saw it as a teenager, but I kind of conflated it a little bit in my head with the John Hughes teen movies of the 80s. Like, I sort of had them all in the same bunch, although this one always felt different. And when I was rewatching it for what I worked on the re-release of Heathers that happened a few years ago in the UK, and kind of with the restoration and the new Blu-ray release and all that stuff. And it was kind of amazing thinking about it a lot deeper and putting it into that context, because it is like a one-of-a-kind teen movie that happened and feels completely at odds with every other teen movie that came before it, and inspired so many other, not copycat films, but definitely darker themed teen movies. And as I was rewatching it for this, I was thinking like, okay, so this isn't really a horror movie, but it's way too dark. There's a lot of murder. There's a clear-cut psychopathic villain. There's a conspiracy to blow up the entire school. There's shit tons of deaths. So why is Heathers not a horror movie in a way?
I don't know. It kind of is if you. I mean, if you count the experience of being a teenage girl as living inside a horror movie, which I think it is.
I would agree.
I mean, I guess that's the definition of it. Really, because, I mean, it is about teenagehood as a whole, but I think it's very specifically about teenage girldom, and the nastiness that girls show each other, because like JD is such an obvious villain, but it takes maybe a little more of a couple more steps to go, well, yeah, but also the Heathers are absolute monsters as well. And that's the thing with Veronica. She goes from one set of monsters to another, and you're only getting close to a happy ending when she just goes, actually, fuck all of this.
So let's talk about the Heathers themselves. So you mentioned it, like they're the queen bees and the indirect monsters of the movie. So we've got Heather Chandler, who's red, who's the kind of the leader of them. We've got Heather Duke, and we've got Heather McNamara. So how do the Heathers rule their high school, and how does Veronica fit or not fit in them?
Lunchtime polls. Well, okay, this is the really interesting thing about Heathers is that Winona Ryder has been pushing for a sequel like her entire career. It's the favorite part that she's ever played. And there was an idea that the screenwriter Daniel Waters had of doing Heathers 2, where she goes into politics. And she discovers that it's the same. And I think that really explains how the Heathers function, is that they view the school as a microcosm for the entire world, for society. And JD does as well, because he mentions it at the end. But they see themselves very much as like politicians. It's the smiling to some people. And I think the lunchtime poll scene is such a great example of that. Who they're smiling at, who they're being friendly with, who they completely ignore, who they abuse. It's like, it's not just that. It's not just that they're mean all the time. It's like a very sophisticated image of the mean girl, where they're constantly manipulating themselves to get what they want. It is pure like sociopathy. They will be a different person to whoever they're talking to, depending on the thing that they are seeking.
And also, they are completely miserable all the time. So there's a couple of choice kind of scenes. So Heather Duke, who's played by Shannon Doherty, is very much bullied by Heather Chandler all the time, and especially bullied for being bulimic. And Heather McNamara is extremely quiet as well, and will never stand up to the main Heather. And Heather Chandler like gets essentially sexually assaulted and really clearly like hates herself, and spins out on Veronica in that scene at the university party. But like they're all pretty fucking miserable with each other and individually, and yet they continue.
Yeah, and I guess that's again, it's like the politics thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is because they view that as their function in society.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a couple of lines that really hint at, and Veronica talks about this. Like, I think she says it's like being popular is a job that you have.
Yes. Yes.
And that's how the Heathers view themselves. Like, their personal feelings, like the body image issues, the sexual assault, I think Heather McNamara, you really get the sense that she has depression or some sort of like mental illness that she's having to hide every single day.
Mm-hmm.
That shit doesn't matter because they're popular. That's the most important thing in their existence, and that's why like there are multiple sexual assaults in this movie, and I think what's very clever about it is the fact that they're sort of backgrounded and not overly commented upon, because that is the psyche of the Heathers, and like that's what's so like it's equally sad and repulsive. I think their entire existence is that you see how much they suffer, how sad and how truly lonely they are. But also I think you're allowed to not forgive them because, they are as much a victim of the cycle as they are perpetuating it.
Yes. Yeah, they absolutely are.
I guess, that's the irony of Heathers.
And you kind of mentioned at the start that Veronica really has kind of these pure intentions, but I think that she kind of gets to them eventually, because at the start, like, even though she really does not fit in both in her name and in her approach to things with the Heathers, she does want to do things differently, but I think that comes after a period of being in with the popular girls, because she also like is revealed trades her old friends in order to be cool, in order to be ruling the high school with the Heathers. But now is kind of bored and resistant to how they do things. So I do think that it's like a journey that she goes on to kind of become a slightly less mean girl.
Yeah, I like kind of slightly disagree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go on.
Dissent. To me, the thing with Veronica is that, she used to be not popular. I mean, they give her a backstory in the musical that I actually find kind of interesting.
Okay.
Is that, she is this unpopular person that the Heathers just enlist because they find her useful. In the musical, it's because she can forge notes, which they sort of imply in the movie as well, which is very good at doing. So they just absorb this girl. And I don't think she ever really wanted to be there, but like, if the popular girls tell you, come sit at my table, you don't say no, right? And I think the position that she's at in the beginning of the movie is that she still remembers the person that she used to be and still wants to be that person. And you see in the way that she interacts with Betty Finn, like, that's her old best friend, and she's still kind to her. And still like apologizes for not going to her birthday party. And like Betty Finn makes this joke of like, oh, I wouldn't go to my own birthday party if I had a hot date, which Veronica had. And she goes, no, don't say that, because that's the old Veronica's still there. But I think she's so being eaten up by guilt at the beginning because she is part of a system that she doesn't want to be, but she doesn't really know what to do about it. Because what do you do about it? Like,
Well, that's true. And I think it's the party at the college party, really, that's kind of her breaking point, where she does stand up to Heather Chandler. But I think I think it is implied that there is like a backstory or a time where she might have been like as mean as the other Heathers, but now she's done with it and she's bored with it and it's not her and it's not how she wants things to be. I haven't seen a musical myself, so like that's not canon for me, Clarice. I'm sorry.
No, I'm already bringing it up because I think like the movie kind of implies it, and it's interesting that the musical makes it text that.
Yeah, that
she
is
was just
interesting.
enlisted because she was useful to them, because that is how I've always seen her. I think she's done bad things, but I don't think she's ever been happy to be a Heather.
I agree.
This is the breaking point.
I think she's done bad things, but not a bad person. Not like Heather Chandler, who is like truly quite very mean-spirited. But so what about JD? The hot psychopathic goth boyfriend that shows up.
I mean, I think what is like so fantastic about this film is that JD, like, he is that guy that when you first see him, like, in the cafeteria, and the way that he talks, and like he's so like, he sees everybody for who they truly are. Like, you kind of, you know, kind of like, oh, okay, this guy. Yeah, a bit of a Catcher in the Rye vibe, but like we can get on board. There is something seductive about him. Well, yeah, very, very. I'm trying to defend myself. But that's the thing. I think like JD doesn't work. If you don't, I think JD doesn't work if you're not into him at the beginning. Or if you don't acknowledge why Veronica would be into him. And then that's the twist of it, is like you spend a lot of the movie sort of wanting to be like, oh, but maybe, and the movie keeps going, nope, no, he's a sociopath. It's a bit like I've been watching You on Netflix. I think that show does a very similar thing of presenting you as someone who is traditionally looks, talks, and acts like kind of a heartthrob, and you spend a lot of that TV show going, oh, but maybe, oh, but, and the show keeps going, nope, no, he's a murderer, no. And I love that. I love that because it so exposes the whole like myth of how white guys get away with terrible things, because like society, we're all conditioned to be into certain things that are very toxic, and I think it does, I don't know, I think it does such a good job with JD. I love him in this movie, but I love how awful he is.
I love it too, and he's also one of those guys. No, because I think, you know what, you hit the nail on the head, and I wanted to let you finish, because he's like a walking red flag, but he's a walking red flag that you kind of don't see, because same as with Joe Goldberg on You, he's doing all the things that we've seen everywhere make us kind of fall in love with him, really. Even from the way that he's presented, he's like, even his name, you know, when he's kind of like a 80s gothy James Dean, right? That's kind of the take. The like aggressively antagonistic, very classically handsome loner that's smart and like reads books in the school cafeteria and kind of doesn't take any shit from the jocks, right? But he also pulls a gun out, like the first scene we meet him. Like, there is clearly something wrong with this guy, but we're so ready to excuse him because, oh, edgy, right? It's so edgy. Look at the black trench coat.
To the bullies,
yeah,
you know, like they deserved it.
And like in the same,
and then you feel like such an idiot by the end. You're like, what the fuck?
But it kind of changes. And like when you see this, if you're like a weird girl in high school or a weird teen girl, and you watch this as a weird teen girl, and you're like, oh my god, JD, yes. And then when you watch it as an adult, you're like, oh, it's fucking sociopath right there walking in. And I kind of love that, because even as an adult, every time I rewatch this film, I'm like, but maybe. And then it's like, no, do not do that. Everything he's doing is bad. There is no salvation for this person. And I think that's the thing that Veronica kind of realizes as well throughout the film. Like, he feels so much like a burst of fresh air in that high school, in that stifling kind of teen dynamic. And then he manages to convince her that they haven't actually murdered Heather, which they absolutely have. Like Veronica unwillingly and unknowingly. So it's fucking weird and complicated. It just taps into how, like you said, just how easily we're ready to forgive a good-looking edgelord.
And also, like, what I love about this movie is it's what he brings out in her. Because as you said, he convinces her that they didn't kill Heather Chandler. But then the murder after, where he gets the gun with these bullets, and he, like, gives this bullshit story about how they're actually German bullets from World War II.
Oh my god, yes.
And it's, like, it's so clearly bullshit.
Yeah.
And you know that Veronica knows that it's bullshit.
Yeah.
But she's telling herself a story to make herself look innocent. And I think her realization is less that JD is a bad person, but more that JD is bringing out the bad person in her.
Oh, yes.
And you know, the darkest scene for me, that is such a small moment that every time I watch it, I go, Jesus, is after they've killed Ram and Kurt.
Yeah.
And it's the morning after, and they're in the car, and she takes the lighter and she starts to burn her hand, just as like a self-harming.
Yes.
She's so eaten up by guilt, and then he fucking takes her hand and lights his cigarette on the hand.
I know.
And it's so scary, and it's such a small moment, and it's like not really something that people talk about when they talk about Heathers. But every time I watch that scene, I'm like, there's a chill going through my body, because I'm like, what the? That is one of the darkest things I've ever seen in a movie. Like, Jesus, okay.
Honestly, like, this is what I meant at the beginning, right? When we started this conversation, it's like, this film has a lot of things that are truly horrific, but it's not really talked about as a horror film. But it's scenes like this where you're like, oh, holy motherfuck. Like, this is a lot more disturbing than, you know, just someone getting murdered through a kitty flap or something like that. I'm thinking about Scream. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get murdered by Freddy Krueger over this. Like, it's straightforward. He just comes in your dreams and he murders you. Like, JD, you gotta go through a whole thing before he kills you, and you die feeling very weird about yourself. So
yeah, you die kind of like both being a little bit aroused and very conflicted and very guilty, having a whole conversation with you about your problematic horniness. Like, it's very complicated. JD is a fucking mess of a character, and I love him for that.
Yeah, please just murder me at a summer camp instead. I don't want to deal with this too much.
So, and kind of on that note, what about the actual murder? So there's one thing actually that Christian Slater said at the time of release that I loved so this film did not do, like you mentioned in our intro, this film did not do very well when it was released. It was very badly released. It did like nothing at the box office. It didn't make back its budget. It was like it became a cult hit and eventually kind of was really resurrected and stuff, but people just didn't know what the fuck to do with this film. It was just odd. And a lot of people kind of protested about it glorifying suicide and being irresponsible because it's targeted towards a teen audience, right? And there's something I saw of an interview with Christian Slater at the time of the film's release where he was like, what are they talking about? There's no actual suicides in the film. It's all murders.
Yes. Well, there's
one
like an attempted suicide.
There's an attempted one. And actually, like, in the not to plug myself, but I wrote one of the essays for our re-release of Heathers, and one of my points was like, actually, I think one of the main points of the film is that while they're so busy talking and doing these like weird self-aggrandizing and self-serving sessions about suicide prevention, actually there's real teenagers in distress. Heather McNamara is one. Martha is the other one, is the girl who attempts to like walk into traffic. So like there's real teenagers suffering and they're being ignored while everyone is faffing around talking about how to prevent teenagers from being sad and self-harming. And that those moments are really, really human and kind of right there. But really kind of ignored by the rest of the characters. And that's the most kind of real life conversation that it can, like, that's the most accurate, I think, representation of what it's like to be a teenager in emotional pain, right? Where you have all of these slogans and supposed support systems and stuff, but very few of them actually acknowledge and empathize and take seriously anxiety or mental health issues in teenagers. I think that's definitely changed, but I think Heathers perhaps did not land with people at the time because it was trying to illustrate visually something that was just didn't really exist in the conversation, didn't really exist in the same way in as it does now.
You're so right, and like the accusation that Heathers in any way like glamorizes or glorifies suicide is ridiculous to me, because it's one of the most anti-suicide films that I have ever seen. You know, the way that, I mean, it's that great line from Veronica. It's like, you're gonna make yourself another statistic in USA of today, and it's really, I mean, it's quite scathing about media coverage of mental illness and of suicide, and the idea of like copycat situations, and like the whole irony of these people who are murdered when they write the suicide note that is like, oh, secretly like exposes this internal life, and the way that the adults like jump on that, and the teacher is distributing the note in class saying, read this, see how she felt, how emotional. It's like, I can't imagine a worse thing you could do in that situation. It's so scathing about the way that the media and adults handle these kinds of narratives, and the romanticization of I think any kind of teenage self-harm, in the way that it's like, yeah, the way that they're like, oh, these teens, you know, they're hurting, like, we just have to be open to, and when, yeah, the thing that really cuts through it all is Veronica say that line, you don't want to be another statistic in the USA, like, something that simple, because what she's saying is like, hey, Heather McNamara, like, don't fall for what society wants you to do. Because that's what they want you to do, because they want to be able to romanticize this shit. They want to be able to, like, use this as a jumping off point for some, like, bullshit legislation, you know? Like, they don't care about you. They care about how they can manipulate your death to advance their own agendas. And I think, like, wow. What a great, like, really on point. I think, as you said, maybe, like, a little less true today, but I think for the time period especially, it was so true, so on point, and all the narratives that were happening at that time. And how patronizing. I think of, like, the 80s, and I think of how patronizingly teenagers were treated. Like, this whole say no to drugs, like, Nancy Reagan shit is, like... like, I think that's what this movie is making fun of, like these ridiculous narratives that teenagers were fed throughout the entire decade, which didn't help anybody at all.
And kind of, you know, going back to the murder, there is we kind of started in that direction, because I think what's interesting rewatching Heathers is that the murder scenes are quite extensive. Like, they spend a lot of time with the body. You know, the actual scenes of violence are like quite direct and efficient, but there's like a lot of time spent rearranging the bodies, kind of putting them in positions, crafting these stories around them, faking the suicide notes, you know, like creating all these narratives, and then sort of reveling, especially JD, in how people react to it, which I think is, again, is like those elements of horror that I really like about Heathers, that mix up the genre so well. What do you think about the way that the actual violence is presented and played around with?
Yeah, I like that it isn't particularly realistic, I guess. You know, I mean, Heather Chandler, you know, the drinking of the Drano scene is so sort of dramatic, where she's got like the blue teeth and then she smashes through the table, you know, instant death. It's sort of, there's something like a little bit pantomime to how all these deaths play out, because it locks into that idea that this film is just all about like the romanticization and ritualization of teen death by society. I think it works that it's all like, it's like a little bit silly, but on purpose, if that makes sense.
What do you mean?
With Kurt and Ram running around in their underwear for like 5 minutes, and when they get shot, it's like it's a very like small bullet hole. It's not, it has no bearing on real life, I feel like, right? Am I but it's more about, it's all very symbolic, I guess. Because it's so much about who's doing the murdering as opposed to who's getting murdered, and then what the deaths are then being used for.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why, as you said, so much time is spent with the bodies afterwards, trying to like, fake the murder scene, writing the notes. It's just like, it's again that thing of like the manipulation of death being for an agenda, and people using someone else's, like, how would you feel to have your death being used for something out of your control? I guess that's like the message of Heathers in the end.
And what do you make about the way that it kind of escalates? Because the other thing, once Veronica starts pushing back against JD, he kind of goes into his full monstrous self, and he sets up this plan to essentially like blow up the entire school with all the kids in there, like during prom. And I think this is quoted as, this is usually referred to as one of the reasons why Heathers could not be made today, because now we live in a post-Columbine world where unfortunately these types of events and happen in a lot of schools and are not gonna keep happening over and over again. And this is such a, it has a completely different kind of interpretation watching it now, because you're kind of seeing a prediction of things that would materialize and would happen quite a lot, of students massacring other students. But the way that it's, how do you think it's played out here?
I guess that's why I said that the deaths are a little bit silly, because in the minds of the makers of this film, like the idea of, all these teenagers killing each other and planting a bomb, in the basement of the school gymnasium was sort of a fantasy idea. They weren't basing it off anything real. It was always meant to be like, let's take the everyday tension within a school and push it to its greatest extreme, which would be physical violence and death. And I think that's really how that scene plays out. And like, while you're watching it, you have to sort of allow it again to remind yourself when this was made and go, well, that's what this is about. It's about the stuff that JD tells her in the basement of like, the only place that different types of social classes are gonna get along is in heaven, which is like such a fucking weird, dark thing to say. but also like kind of true, and that's like the horribleness of it, is that he's sort of right to say that, obviously not the bomb, but to say that line. And so it is interesting to watch it today. And I think at the end of the day, like, focusing too much on, or trying to say too much about its connections to like the world that we live in, it's a little misguided, and I think it detracts from what the film is doing, which is why that remake was such a terrible idea.
Yeah. And I'm in no way, by the way, saying that like it in any way like predicted or inspired real life events, but I realize why that is a reason why a lot of people kind of now feel particularly uncomfortable watching it, or like, trying to remake it.
Well, I think like the thing that it predicted, or the thing that it knew then that we know now, is like it's like that the kids are not okay. That like there is that, you know, the sort of people that are like JD do exist, and as we have so, you know, tragically and horrifically seen, are pushed and have been pushed to violence. And, you know, I think that's the only sort of connection, is to go like, you know, the taking teens seriously. I don't know, like the need to take these people, you know, there's that whole thing about like Veronica wanting to be treated like an adult, and to have all her concerns be seen and treated seriously. And I think like that's the sort of thing that it predicted, that like teen matters are real, and they are serious, and they're not things for adults to brush under the carpet. And like the very like tragic result of that we've seen is the violence in schools. You know, I think I think that's like kind of the only connection, is that it was saying at that time, like, please don't brush teenagers off, you know. And
the other thing as well that is completely unique about this film really is that it deliberately did not try to be set in any particular time. And I mean, you know, it does feel very late 80s because obviously of the cast, some of the fashions and stuff.
Shoulder pads.
You know what? Shoulder pads have come back. So
that's true.
But like, I think it was a very deliberate choice in the script, and the way that they speak is so completely unique. It's completely out of place and out of time for the 80s, for now. Kind of, what do you think makes Heather such an outlier in these choices, in the script, in the visuals?
Well, what always makes me laugh is that Daniel Waters, the screenwriter, has said that when he sat down to write Heathers, he's like, I'm gonna make a teen movie if it was made by Stanley Kubrick.
I know, I love it. The ambition, I respect it. The audacity, yes, Daniel. Well done.
And you know what? I don't think he's fully wrong. I mean, obviously, Stanley Kubrick had made like a teen comedy, it wouldn't have been Heathers, but
I would love, and if anyone listening to this can make this happen, I would love for someone on the internet to actually make like one of these fan trailers for what a teen comedy directed by Stanley Kubrick would look like. Fucking love to see that. I would love to see that. It's like when, you know, someone remade The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air as like a prestige dark drama.
Oh my god!
Someone like an independent filmmaker made like a fan trailer for that, reimagined with that tone, and it was perfect. Chef's kiss. Someone do that, but for Heathers is directed by Stanley Kubrick. Anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. I interrupted you.
Right, like where he's not wrong, I'll say, is I think the timelessness of it plays into this idea that it's like symbolism, like everything's constantly symbolic, and you know, the color palettes of the Heathers, the croquet game, like so much of how the film is constructed, the things that they say, you know, fuck me gently with a chainsaw, do I look like Mother Teresa? Like there's so much in that line, you could spend days taking it apart. I think that's the thing, it's timeless because it's all kind of like mythical teenagehood where every action is laden with meaning, but if you take that all apart, you know, the emotions that it's pinned down to are extremely and terrifyingly real.
You mentioned one of the famous lines, fuck me gently with a chainsaw, but what do you think about the dialogue specifically?
I love it. I love to quote it. How very fantastic. Yeah, and I guess it was really, it was again going back to that thing of let's just take teenagers seriously and to give them the intellect to have developed their own language. Because you're right that it's not really like 80s slang, because it's not something that culture has given to them. It's something that they've invented themselves, and it gives them like an independence that a lot of other teen movies wouldn't have. I guess, you know, after that you have like Diablo Cody, who was doing kind of the modern version of the Heathers lingo.
Totally, especially in Juno and Jennifer's Body.
Yes, yeah, Jennifer's Body, like,
it's pretty much,
there's a lot of Heathers in that movie.
Absolutely. What, do you have a favorite quote from Heathers?
Oh, I love so many. Oh my god. I love Fuck Me Gently with a Chainsaw. I love Halle Berry. I love You Look Like Hell. I just got back. Our Love Is God. Let's Go Get a Slushie. Chaos Created the Dinosaurs. I just feel like
Greetings and Salutations is a great starting point. My teen angst bullshit has a body count. Fucking love that.
What else do I love? I love when Veronica stands up to Heather Duke, and she's like, "Why do you have to be such a mega bitch?" And she just responds, "Because I can." And it's like, oh. There's just, I don't know, there's so many good moments. And I think that's the thing, is everyone can take like, there are the famous lines, like, "Fuck Me Gently with a Chainsaw," but I feel like everyone has their own little moments that they get really attached to.
So before we wrap up, Clarice, is there anything about Heathers that we haven't talked about that you wanted to bring up?
So much. I mean, I just want to say that Winona Ryder in this.
Oh my god.
Because she is one of the realest teenagers I've ever seen on screen.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, if you watch the John Hughes, I mean, if we're looking at this as coming after the John Hughes era, I never related to any of those characters. Like, you know, they were too perfect and too perfectly created. And, you know, even though Breakfast Club is about not being put into boxes, like, a lot of the character work in the John Hughes movies is putting people into little boxes.
Fair.
And what I love about Winona Ryder, like, in this movie is that she just, like, she isn't anything. She's just, like, an angry teenage girl. And we never really get to see that very often. Someone who's just, like, fed up and sees her existence for what it is, and kind of just wants to be an adult already, but also sort of doesn't. You know, that's the kind of stuff that I relate to, and I related to. You know, I think that was interesting, is like not watching it as a teenager, but watching it right after I'd kind of left teenagehood. It felt very validating to watch this movie, because a lot of the thoughts and feeling, again, I'm excluding the murder, I'm just talking about like the way that Veronica sees herself and like her role in society, like, you know, the whole thing of her just like, God, why can't everybody just be nice, or something that I've thought a lot growing up and still think today. And to have a character, you know, which is half in the writing and I think half in Winona's performance, someone who's just like, why can't things just be, you know, why can't we just all be normal? Why have we all got to be weird with each other all the time? Like, I love that. That to me is what makes Heathers like my movie.
And also possibly has one of the best endings, exaggerated, OTT for sure, but one of the best endings of teen films, where she just wants to hang out with someone nice and watch some movies. That's all she wants to do. No bullshit. No high school politics. No cool dudes.
Yeah. Although I like when she's like, there's a new sheriff in town.
Yeah, that's cute. And she takes a
It's
scrunchie
sort
of
the
power.
Fantasy. Yeah, it's like sort of the fantasy of like, I think a lot of unpopular kids have of like, if I could just become popular, then I could change things, you know?
Well, yeah, but very often, like, the narrative of that is proven to be that they're kind of worse than their bullies, right? It's sort of like in the much maligned season 6 of Buffy, where the three like
Okay, yeah.
uncool dudes kind of gain powers. And the whole thing is that they're a lot worse than the people that they hate. Or like in Christine, right? Like Arnie, who is the nerd of the school, is actually a lot more of a vicious character and a very nasty person. And being emboldened or empowered by the car Christine, only makes him worse. But that was always in him. Whereas Veronica genuinely does kind of just wanted everyone to be okay.
Yeah, but I think that's the difference between those characters and Veronica is that she wants to break down the system. Like, that's the end. I think when she takes the scrunchie, she says there's a new sheriff in town. It's not that she's just going to become the popular girl and she's going to be nice, which I think is more the fantasy of those characters. That she's going to become the popular girl and she's going to stop the idea of popularity, you know? She's going to be Lindsay Lohan at the end of Mean Girls, like, breaking the crown and throwing it into the crowd. Like, you know, lots of people say that Mean Girls is, you know, a kind of a Heather's descendant, and I think in that image, like, it is sort of a fantasy, but I think it's a fantasy that a lot of people have of like, God, if I could just get enough power to like break the system, because it's so hard, you feel so helpless when you don't have the power. And I think Heathers really deals with that fantasy, like both the impossibility of it and also like maybe hope, maybe hope.
I mean, it's no coincidence that the director of Mean Girls is the brother of Daniel Waters, the screenwriter of Heathers. Yeah,
which apparently they asked the director of Heathers, Michael Lerman.
Yeah.
And he was like, I already made that movie.
Yeah.
It's called Heathers. That's a great anecdote.
Yeah. So I think we wrapped up everything that we needed to talk about Heathers. I mean, we could go into so much more. It's such a dense movie. And there's so many different entry points into it. But now wrapping up both of these, having spoken about both Monster Squad and Heathers at length, how do you see these two fitting in with each other?
I think... Yeah, let me think about this for a second. I think what makes both of them great is that they're films that really tried not to talk down to their audience. And that's what made them feel out of place for their time, because, you know, throughout all history, we just think, I keep coming back to the same things. It's like, we just never want to take kids and teenagers seriously because we think now that we're adults, like, we know everything, we can do everything. And, you know, to inflate an adult's ego, you put down kids and teenagers as just, you know, not knowing anything. And I like that both of these movies go, actually, you know what? They know just as much, probably more, and can do just as much, probably more, good and bad. Yeah, still undecided about the kids having guns. Squad. But maybe that's me as an adult thinking I know better. But yeah, I think that to me is the connecting thread.
I think that's a very nice way to wrap both of these movies up. So, Clarice, thank you so much for your time and for your insight into these. Where can people find more of your work online?
All of my work is always posted to my Twitter at Clarice Liu, and also You can listen to a podcast. Fade to Black, that I do every week with two very good buddies of mine. And also we do a podcast.
We do a podcast.
Called The Next Supremes, if you like American Horror Story. And then there's... I have lots of other podcasts. Just go on my Twitter. That's where all the podcasts are.
You've got a Book to Screen podcast as well, which comes out every month.
Yeah, Big Screen Book Club. We're doing Emma at the moment. And Jane Austen.
And you've got a really, really, really fun newsletter, which I love, which you publish every Thursday?
Yes, every Thursday at 6 p.m. it goes out. Thank you. That's really nice of you to say.
Well, I'm like your unofficial publicist. It's cool.